the red flag flying here.
Hello and welcome to Socialist Night Live on Socialist Think Tank. We've got some really special guests for you tonight. Before we go into that, please do like and share and do all those things that you always do for us to try to get this message out, because it is going to be for me, one of the most important messages that we can get out as well. And we're also going to learn from people who actually do things and actually are making a difference in the world at the moment, how to go about that, how to take action, and how to make change. So we have got representatives here from Disabled People Against the Cuts. We have, I'm going to start with Paula because you've been on before, but Paula, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Good evening, everyone. Paul, thank you for having us all on tonight. So I'm Paula Peters, disabled person. I'm an activist with Disabled People Against Cuts. I'm the Equalities Officer for my Trades Council here in Bromley and Chair of Bromley and Croydon Unite Community. So, and I have to say, I joined DPAC back in 2012 and I've learnt so much from every activist in DPAC. And I have to say, if I hadn't have found DPAC on Facebook back then, I very much doubt if I'd be talking to you today. So I owe DPAC an awful lot, actually.
That's you never fail to really get to the heart of us there, Paula. So that's really good news, and DPAC actually making a big difference in people's lives in ways that other people don't even see without even before you take an action. That community that you've got, so important there. So and thanks for sharing that, Paula. It really means a lot. We've also got David Kirkham. Hi, David.
Hello. Hi. Yes, I'm David Kirkham. I'm part of DPAC Sheffield. Again, been an activist with DPAC since 2012. When the first action I did was against Atos, which was one of the big assessment companies that have been given the contracts to take away the means to live from disabled people by the government. And that was in protest at Atos sponsoring the Paralympics at London 2012. So that's my history with DPAC.
And can you just tell us, so we've got people from all over the world. Why was it so inappropriate for Atos to sponsor? Did you say it was the Paralympics?
It was the Paralympics in London 2012. Yes. Well, because at the same time as they're trying to do the whole corporate responsibility BS, that they are responsible for being part of a regime that's persecuting disabled people, that's taken away a very meager amount of money to live on, putting people in huge distress. People are committing suicide, killing themselves, made suicidal by the situations they're being put in by companies like Atos, and all ramped up after the 2008 financial crash, when obviously disabled people on the pittance every week were responsible for crashing the world economy, to save money under austerity, which has done bugger all for anybody.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it's that corporatization thing, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah. It's very easy to say that you're supportive of disabled people, but actually, people who are damaging disabled people's lives and actually causing that kind of havoc that Atlas did with their role in austerity, their role in the assessments and everything. I think that's so hypocritical. It's so hypocritical. It's unbelievable. And, you wouldn't believe it really, would you, if you thought, oh, this is what they were going to do. This is what Atos are going to have the goal to do. And yet here we are. But well done on that one. Absolutely brilliant. And we've also got Jan Gray. Hi, Jan. Jan isn't part of DPAC, are you? So this is a bit of an introduction to DPAC. Maybe by the end of this, you might be involved.
I might well be. My name's Jan Gray. I am disabled. I am a parent of a disabled son. I'm separately a parent, and I work in the area too. I am horrified by how I've witnessed and experienced the most horrific behaviour by professionals and by government institutions, and I have fought them in so many ways, and I wholeheartedly support what DPAC are doing.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure you're going to have a few insights for us from like a personal point of view, and that's what's so important about this show. We're not going to be talking about it from a distance. These are real lived experiences that you've all shared, isn't it? And you'll have different experiences from one another. And the other thing is, like, disabled people are as diverse in background and as diverse in opinion as any other group of people, and too often people are lumped together as if, oh yes, that's a disabled person and therefore they're just one person. But you're so diverse and there are so many different needs that people have. I think it's really important to highlight that. We've got a question in already for Paula. I'm going to address it because before we get into the main part of it, before we talk about what we're going to talk about, a question for Paula. As a Unite community member, how concerned are you that Sharon Graham may not be as supportive of community branches as her predecessor?
Well, I've been a Unite community member since 2013, and I would say, well, she's talked an awful lot about Unite community, and she wants to make Unite community have more of a role in Unite. She's brought about, the issues she's raised about, Unite community doing housing campaigns, anti-racism campaigns, climate action campaigns. We're already doing all of that. Supporting industrial members with strike action and everything. We've been doing that in the 10 years conception. She's only new in the role, so we have to see what happens going forwards. I didn't vote for Sharon Graham. I voted for another candidate. But we'll just have to see what happens going forwards. And I think the most important thing now is to unite behind Sharon for the bigger battles we've got going forwards, which are the attacks on workers' rights and conditions, the appalling working practice of firing and rehiring, which I was involved in a banner drop over Westminster Bridge Wednesday just gone, and supporting other Unite community branches and Unite community activists, and support one another, build Unite community going forwards.
See, the thing I like about you, Paula, is like you just drop these things in, and I did this thing the other day, and this banner drop was like, well, that'd be the best thing I'd done in like 10 years. But you just happen to do 3 or 4 of these things a week, which is absolutely brilliant, and we'll get onto the banner drop later on.
I'll tell you what, I was shattered after that day of action, to be honest. I wish I had the energy to do 3 or 4 actions a week. Sadly, that's not the case. And, I think all of us as activists, we pay a heavy cost when we're out there on the street, often with our energy levels, and I'm still exhausted from Wednesday's action, to be honest with you. But I'd love to be able to do 3 or 4 banner drops a week, but sadly I can't. But no, it's just supporting a group of Unite officials and who are doing a great campaign around raising the issues of firing and rehiring. And at the TUC conference early this week, there was a disabled member who works in, I think it's Asda's, who was under, one of those appalling contracts, and he shared his story, which was out all over Twitter. And that was really important to show that disabled workers are also being hit by the appalling working practice of fire and rehiring as well. And that's really important to stress that, 0 hours contracts are rising, the gig economy, and, low paid, unsustainable work is rising as well. And disabled people often find themselves in those, in those working practices. So it was really important to hear that disabled trade unionists talking about that. And but yeah, we've got to see what Sharon does going forwards. And my branch sent her a message of congratulations, and see what happens next.
Yeah, she seems to be for people who work, and she doesn't seem to be against community branches as far as I've seen. I haven't seen anything, so I'm sure people will judge anyone on their actions, and let's hope those actions are absolutely outstanding, because we've never needed the might of the trade unions like we do at the moment in many years. So yeah, that's massive. So what I'm going to move on to next is we're going to get a bit of a background. So Disabled People Against the Cuts wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the cuts. So let's talk a little bit about what led to the cuts. So we had the world financial crash in 2008, which followed a load of where bankers were they were bundling in subprime mortgages with other mortgages. Basically, they were doing sort of nefarious acts in the financial markets. Someone may be able to explain this more eloquently than me, but the bankers were doing that. And the people who ended up paying for that were ordinary workers and disabled people and people who had no involvement at all in profiting from these really, really nefarious acts where they were doing things that were incredibly irresponsible financially, and they caused a worldwide financial crisis and still got bonuses. And we're in a situation where people had been forced into all sorts of poverty, the rise of food banks, cuts to any sort of benefits that people had, and ridiculously cruel regimes where disabled people were forced to do humiliating things. Now, we talked about this before, didn't we? With the last time you were on, Paul, we talked about the assessments, and we really focused on that. But let's talk about how those cuts have affected disabled people since particularly 2010, when the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition came in the UK. So who would like to start? We've heard from Paula a little bit. Who would like to go on this one? We'll get being shy. David, I'm going to pick on you. You look like...
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, the thing is, once I get started, I can't stop. So I don't like to be the kind of person that anybody else can't get a word in edgeways. How have they? Well, in so many different ways, and in so many ways that people who aren't familiar with the punitive system won't realise. For instance, I mean, I don't know if this has been discussed before, but the whole of the social. I prefer to call it social security, because that's what it should be. That's what it was set up as, security. And you've had this whole terminology coming from the United States, especially called benefits, as if it's something special, it's some kind of special treatment for people. You're being given what is your right to actually just have basic standard of living, a roof over your head, food in your belly, and enough money to heat your home and look after your kids, compared to what, like you said, compared to what happened after the financial crash, or during, or all the 40 years and 50 years leading up to the financial crash, all the massive wealth disparities and siphoning up of wealth to the 1%, to then say that people who are on the kind of money that Paula and I are trying to live on are the ones taking all the money. It's insane, if you just actually look at it that way. But the whole system is basically forced on an ideology, the neoliberal ideology of like a psychological compulsion for work. Work is the way out of everything, so it's all designed to basically deny people's disabilities, to actually say that, well, those don't exist, that they are not something that will stop you working. It's like a bastardization of the social model of disability, if you know what I mean. The social model says that society puts up barriers to people, i.e. to stop in the workplace, etc. They're saying that, well, those barriers don't exist and your disability doesn't exist. Therefore, we're going to miraculously cure you and get you back to work. Atos, I think one of our mottos at the time with the Atos campaign was Atos miracle workers. Suddenly your condition has gone and you are now fit to go out there in the workplace and and compete for non-existent work with a chronic and acute medical condition, and totally ignore all medical advice, from people. So it's all part of this. It's all punitive and designed. It's all based on the US health insurance model, especially a company called Unum, which is one of the biggest health insurers in the US. Which is just, with a process which is designed to weed out insurance claims. So again, it's actually tied in with the ongoing privatization of the NHS, because instead of a doctor or a specialist assessing your condition and your suitability for work, suddenly it becomes the responsibility of some so-called assessor at a private company who has no speciality in your particular condition. Because we've got a target to meet and want to take as many people off of Social Security as possible. And so so from the very beginning, it causes distress. Just the very process of applying for it, it's decided to weed things out. So I think a lot of people will try not going for the disability benefits because of that. They've heard of how distressing it is and how convoluted it is. So that's one way. So people will just try and get by without claiming what they are entitled to claim. And then once they've made the claim, because it's so degrading, and because there's always a constant assessment of your condition every so many years, it's just basically putting people into penury, so that you're being punished for being disabled. Because as far as the government's concerned, you're of no use unless you're out there making a profit for the ruling class. And that leads to all sorts of complications in society. And also from an economic angle, it doesn't work either, because it means there's less money going around in local economies, so that people haven't got the money to spend in the local economy. And that suffers as well. So I can talk about it from my point of view as well, about what I've been through. I mean, I went through the ESA process. Let's remember that it did come in under New Labour, the assessment process. I had just been, I just got, my condition is ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, and anxiety and depression, amongst other things. Going to the assessment with I had to, first of all, I had to go with my mum, who was also disabled, because I needed support there. Giving sort of one-word answers to questions, I didn't really understand what the questions were. Why were they asking me these stupid questions? Extremely distressing experience. And then getting 0 points. In other words, not eligible for any benefits whatsoever. I later found out I was.
What questions might they ask? Sorry, just to...
Well, I don't know what the questions are now. I don't know if Paul has got any updates on. They keep changing it. But it's basically, you get asked, and you get a lot of them are trick questions. There are trick questions. I remember one particular one, and it was only after that I spoke to somebody about the process that they say this is actually used to assess your suitability for work. Was something about what do you do in the day then? If you're not going out and you're just staying home, what do you do? Well, I sort of watch television. And how long do you watch television for? And I said something like, I don't know, I can't remember how long. And apparently that is one of the questions. If you can then concentrate on a screen for so many minutes, then you are then deemed able to concentrate for so many minutes on something, on a screen-based task. Therefore, you are suitable for the office. And some years later, I wrote a comedy sketch, because that's one of the things I do. I write radio comedy, and also a filmmaker about these kind of things, about somebody who's paralyzed, can't do anything, going to one of these assessments, and the assessor's basically saying all these things like, well, if you can't speak, then you'd be you'd be annoying your colleagues, because you're not going to be chattering away in the background, and you can, if you don't move away from you don't go to the toilet, you're not going to take any toilet breaks. That's great. Was meant as a parody, how that would never happen, that would ever happen. And then just after that, all these stories about people with terminal illnesses coming in, being sent for assessment at places like Atos. Terminal illness, people were paralyzed, can't do anything, but that because of the conditions they've got and the way it works, with people moving over to an ESA, being actually forced into these assessments and having money taken off them.
So when you experience the cuts, then basically it's sort of a lifeline taken away, because clearly, like, you're a writer, you're a filmmaker, you want to work. This isn't something that, you know, you would much rather, I'm sure, be in full health, able to work, than this. So it just seems pointlessly cruel, the number of stories I've heard about this. And is that your feeling, a pointless cruelty, or is there something else going on?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think probably Jan and Paula would agree. Is it pointless cruelty? The point is to make a scapegoat of disabled people, and basically to dog whistle and make people think that anybody but those who are causing the problems in the world, and those who are actually who hold all, or who control the monetary system, who control capitalism, anybody but them is to blame. So it's why solidarity, you know, we do show solidarity with all the people that are being scapegoated, immigrants, you know, LGBTQ people, public sector workers, everyone that's been, you know, gypsy, Roma, traveller, anyone that's being scapegoated now, who's actually, one thing I say to people is, you know, but not because we want to be in this position, but because of the position we're in, where we don't have a lot of money. You know, disabled people aren't living in massive mansions with swimming pools and tennis courts, you know, in North Yorkshire, like Rishi Sunak is. They're not driving big cars. They're not going on holiday how many times a year, or flying private jets. You know, we make things last. We make clothes last. We make, you know, food stretch. In terms of environmental impact, we're having a much more minimal impact on the planet than the people that are doing all the scapegoating, who are trying to blame, you know, people like us for the situation that they're causing with capitalism.
It's been mentioned in the comments as well that people were actually on a bonus system if they refused people, like if they kept them to a low number of points, so the more people they could get off the bonuses. And then that's just absolute.
I think Paula will know more about that than me, but yes, I've heard about that. Yeah,
I'll come to Paul in a second, but I'm interested in Jan's experiences here. So, Jan, your experience is probably a little different because it's more recent for you, isn't it, personally? And your experience will be different as well, won't it?
It is very different, but it's still very negative. This is actually, I've not gone through any assessments myself. I didn't even admit that I was disabled when I went for my job interview, but they worked it out later on. But going with my son, I went with his EHCP to his assessment. And the EHCP, the teacher the person who'd written it wasn't very good. And she'd written lots of terrible things about him. And they looked at it and said, right, enhanced PIP and never have to be assessed again. Now you think, oh, that's great, but he wants to work. He's not physically disabled, it's autism. He just needs a start. But even if he did, once you're in it, you can't come out. I did this is from knowing people in my situation that are disabled through a disability service. Their campaign said they worked, I'm not paying them. It's not just you, it impoverishes your whole family when you've got a disabled child, because you keep getting called into school. I've gone there and you can't work because you've always got to be there to take them in. So yeah, he wants to work, but you can't even get through. You've got to go through agencies. And if he can't manage his phone, he's not going to be able to take the phone call from the agency. So it's just impossible. But even if he does, his benefits he'll pay tax, because benefits are taxable. He'll pay tax on anything he earns, 25 pence. Someone showed me this, but he will also get a cut of about 63 pence. It's about 63 pence in the pound to his benefits for every pound he makes. So that's sort of 12 pence. So how can you make yourself any better off? And that's with universal credit right across the board. It actually traps you where you physically can't get out. And disabled, if my son did work, he'd probably only manage part-time. But you'd have to go to full-time work at high pay to be able to lift yourself off. Other than that, you are trapped.
So not only are they trying to get people off social security that is there to try to help them, they also are putting barriers in place for people to do that. That is just
It's mental.
an incomprehensible system, isn't it? And Paula, you're nodding along there. So
Yeah.
That's quite a surprise to me in lots of ways, but clearly it isn't a surprise to you with you nodding along there. So what do you think about this, Paula?
It's absolutely, I mean, universal credit, well, we call it conscious cruelty because, you know, whatever work you get, as Jan's already said, so every pound you earn, they take 63p. The more hours you get, you know, the more money you lose. And it's an absolutely catastrophic system. It's an online computer system, and you know, disabled people struggle to fill out the journals and the application system. And I remember being at an event a couple of years ago, you know, and this is where the library campaign is so important. You know, 1/3 of disabled people in the UK is 14 million of us, and 1/3 don't have access to a computer, don't know how to use one, can't afford broadband. You know, you can't afford the basics. So you're needing to use the library to, you know, access the benefit system, access your GP, you know, access, you know, benefit appeals and everything like that. Everything's going online, which excludes disabled people because a lot of the applications for personal independence payments, for ESA, for universal credit, they're not in various different formats for disabled people's access needs, which is another barrier to exclude disabled people from claiming. And you know, we get stories from disabled people all the time that need 2 or 3 people to help complete the online application for universal credit, and you're timed out from, you get so much time to fill out certain sections, and it's a minefield. And you also need photo ID to apply for universal credit. Well, many disabled people don't have a driving license or a passport to, you know, apply for universal credit, so it's another barrier to stop you from being able to claim. And you know, a lot of the some of the libraries here, they've gone down to 3 days a week, which is the same in Croydon and the other borough to me. And you know, when you've got to look for work, you know, 35 hours a week for 5 days and everything, you can't get access to a library, then it's another stick for the DWP to hit you with a sanction, you know. So you're hit with a sanction, you know, and then they stop your money and you're trapped in this endless cycle of poverty. It's just absolutely awful. There's so much, you know, cruelty. And going back to what David said earlier, the government's agenda was it was targeted towards us. It's, you know, when Ellen Clifford, who's Solidarity sister to David and I at DPAC, when she wrote her book, The War on Disabled People, that's exactly what this government's agenda is. It's targeted to, you know, they're targeting us, and there's a long history of targeting disabled people throughout history and around the world. And, you know, but yeah, the government's agenda is a very, you know, if they can put a barrier in place to stop us accessing a service or to remove a service, to marginalise us and exclude us, they're at it and do it.
Okay, so we've got a narrative here. So the richest people in the world decided to become richer and take so many risks to do that. They crashed the world economy and they blamed everyone but themselves. They continue to get the bonuses, and they put disabled people through humiliating assessments. They've cut the pay of ordinary workers across the world, particularly in the UK that we see here. We've got public sector workers who've had pay freezes for years and years, and they haven't seen anything. Now, this, you might think that people would have this in the memory and would be really angry about this, but the same government that did it have been elected again and again, having a right-wing government who want this narrative of, oh, if you don't work, even if your work is meaningless, even if your job is pointless, you still must work. That kind of rhetoric from them, that's the important thing for them, so they can keep people, like, you know, in my opinion, they try to do it to keep people under control. We've just had, well, we're still in a massive pandemic. And again, disabled people's, the experiences during the pandemic will have been different to a lot of people who aren't disabled. So all of us have suffered in one way or another, whether that's been, some people probably ran from being slightly inconvenienced for some to absolutely in fear for their lives, fear for the loved ones' lives, and actually losing loved ones as well. So there is a massive spectrum of ways that this has been affected. I want to talk about how that specifically affected disabled people, and also I'm going to ask you as well, if you want to bring this in, has the way the government have then responded to the financial stimulus that the economy has got this time reminded you of the financial crash, in the way that they're going to raise taxes, raise national insurance, and do a public sector pay freeze again? Whilst also we're seeing the billionaires' wealth has gone up by, what is it, a third, I believe, something like that, in the space of the pandemic. Well, that was a few months ago, so it's probably gone up even more. So, Jan, can you talk us through, like, your experiences and your family's experiences during the pandemic, and how that's affected your life?
Well, I knew it was coming. It affected my son first of all, because we could see in China. We also know someone who talks to people in China, so we knew there was a problem there. We actually started reacting earlier and started trying to be safe. My son stopped going to university. He was getting disabled. He stopped going. He was just too frightened to go to university. I also work in the area, and I realized I would have to protect where I work and protect my household. Big area of distress is my local council phoned me, my son, and told him to stay indoors. Basically, don't go outside. There's a horrible pandemic on. Terrified him. And then spoke to me and said, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you get ill? How are you going to socially isolate? And I thought, well, there's one toilet. We couldn't isolate. It makes no sense. And I said, well, who would help you? And I said, I don't know. Wouldn't you come? No. So my son's support, he had support would come each week. That went. He lost that for a year. And basically he didn't go out for 6 months. And I had to I still carried on working, but we had to put in double shielding. And then my daughter needed to stay somewhere else for a while because she was going back to school. And of course, the Kent schools were actually where we're effectively a petri dish for the alpha variant of the coronavirus. And that was very, very stressful. And so I've been an essential worker. So I've worked right through it, but I haven't realized quite how hard the stress has been until a year, when you realize you just can't take anymore. It's exhausting. I'll end there.
Yeah, there is research studies that show that, like, isolated people can actually get brain damage from social isolation. You can get physical things. So the idea of people having to isolate for so long and having those challenges that facing them is actually, it will be taking a physical toll on people. David, what are your experiences through the pandemic?
Through the pandemic, I think, like a lot of people at the beginning, didn't really know what to expect. It all started off with sort of using a little bit extra hand washing, stuff like that. But I think by sort of the March last year, it was obviously, it was something, much more serious than was being made out. But I think the most disgusting element for me was when the narrative that it's only people with underlying health conditions or elderly people that will get it. Everybody else can go about, doing things. So, you had swathes of the country just writing people off. Oh, they had underlying health conditions. So what if they're dead? Well, they're elderly. So what if they're dead? Just so, I can go out and go on the lash, go to the cinema, go to a party, etc., etc. So from a personal point of view, yes, I've been shielding because I don't know what effects, having a coronavirus or having long COVID would have on a condition which is already, if I can try and explain what ME is a little bit, it's like having the long-term effects of flu for the rest of your life. It's constant fatigue, fibromyalgia. I spend about 16 hours a day in bed because I'm that fatigued and I can't really do it. I spend a lot of time thinking and cogitating. So yeah, I mean there were troubles trying to slot food delivery. I was told that delivery slots for supermarket online deliveries would be prioritized for people with underlying health conditions. Well, I wasn't on the government's list, so there was a period when I was actually going on the supermarket website 4 or 5 times a day just to see if there was a slot available, and just like go in there as soon as it became available, or finding out that the supermarket slots became available at 12 o'clock. So I'm staying until 12 o'clock to try and get a supermarket delivery slot. My particular experience was not good of the vaccine rollout. The vaccine rollout wasn't the majorly efficient, amazing rollout that it was made out to be for disabled people. They did prioritize people with underlying health conditions, but a lot of other underlying health conditions were left off as, not being somebody who was prioritized for a jab. So I had to do a lot of chasing with my GP to get me on that list of people who would be prioritized for their first jab, only to come up against a barrier when my first jab came along in the April last year when there was a vaccine shortage, and I had to do a 50-mile round trip to Wakefield to get my first jab rather than just go to a local surgery. So all those things were happening, just trying to drum it through to flipping people, about taking measures, just, wearing a mask inside, social distancing, washing your hands. It's not just the flu, it's not just a cold. All that kind of crept in as well, just made it 10 times harder, for people, not just disabled people, but everybody to cope with it when you had all that kind of thing going off. So I don't think my experience has been as nightmarish as some people's, but I do know friends who have had awful experiences where they've had not only coping with that, trying to shield family who are vulnerable, and they themselves are clinically vulnerable, but at the same time having to cope with having their social security stopped because of this shit system that we've got. So on top of that, you had people struggling, with no money, using food banks, not being able to pay to heat their homes. All the while, you've got all these corrupt contracts going to friends of the government, Tory donors, Tory cronies, and no opposition from the Labour Party. So, yeah, it's because I spend a lot of time in bed thinking about things. It's made me think about the world. My worldview has changed, perhaps even more than it did after 2008, and a lot of things are being revealed about how things work.
Yeah, the system where any fiscal stimulus whatsoever just immediately goes to the top. It's never been more stark, has it? The fact that they put all this money in and it's ended up with billionaires, and it's not in communities and it's not in people's pockets.
And I also think I said this to somebody earlier today, if they'd done the same as in 2008 and given a direct stimulus to the banks, let's not call it a stimulus, just another reward for complete failure, for ruining the planet and ruining the lives of billions of people. If they'd done it that way, there might have been a bigger backlash because people remember that. But because of the way they've done it this time is through people's own bank accounts and using people as ciphers. So, they've had furlough schemes of they've got the £20 uplift to universal credit, but that will all go, essentially, like you said, to the 1%, because people use it to pay their mortgage, use it to pay the rent, using it to pay, public transport costs for privatized transport, or that kind of, buying things online from supermarkets, buying things from Amazon. All money ends up being siphoned up to the top, because we don't control it. It's not a concept, or that anybody who is outside the super wealthy or the global elite controls money. We just are forced to go along with it. It's sort of manufactured consent, pay up or else. Pay up or else you lose your home, pay up or else you go to prison. And what can I just say? One more thing that's disgusted me even more is ending the free TV license. You had elderly people being cold in care homes. That's a complete social murder of elderly people, on who for the past 10 years and more have been lied to by the BBC. Not just by omission either, but by a complete bias towards the establishment point of view, and that austerity was needed, and that cuts to pensions were needed, that cuts to private sector, to the public sector were needed, cuts to social care were needed, blah 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 blah. This all affected their lives. Got a lot of people to vote Tory on the back of those lies, and then killed them in care homes, and then they got to pay the privilege of being lied to from the BBC as well.
It's you've raised some absolutely brilliant points. I'm noticing in the comments, thank you everyone for your comments. They're all appearing on screen, so the panel can't see them, but they're that way. The comments are over there, and so we always have a fifth panelist who is the guest at home. So anyone who wants to write in will appear on the screen as we go. I did notice Curry Wilkes was involved in this one, and she was saying with the universal credit uplift as well, you could actually do things like that people don't really realise. She could actually afford to get a stable broadband connection, so her children could use broadband, and it's actually cheaper to do that. It's cheaper to have those things. The number of things that are more expensive. It's very expensive to be poor. It's very expensive not to have much money, because you can't get things like your heating, your gas bills and things like that become a much more expensive thing, because you can't plan long term for them. You can't get those price lock-ins that other people can get, and that's a huge aspect that I think a lot of people forget about. Paula, so what your experience? I know you've had a really, really tough year, haven't you? And you've still kept fighting, which is absolutely amazing. And that's going to be the last part of the show, is about how we fight back and what you do to fight back. But your experiences over the last year and a half, they've been tough, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, it started with my aunt in hospital in 2019, and she was in and out of hospital with infections. My aunt had secondary progressive severe MS, so she was in and out of hospital, and our local hospital then said no one was allowed to go in and see her and everything. And that was when we noticed the first thing. I think it was January, February, you could see that the healthcare professionals were starting to change and everything like that. And obviously, I had my mum in hospital as well, and we couldn't go and see her. February, it was noticing the shortages in the shops. People were starting to stockpile, and partner's mum's got colitis. It was getting things like toilet rolls back then as well, worrying what we were going to have to do with shortage of toilet rolls and everything. And people were stockpiling them in shopping trolleys, just loads and loads and loads of them. And if people stockpile a trolley load of toilet rolls, you need to see a doctor because there's something seriously wrong, you know, sorry, but, you know, and it was basics. It was pasta, it was toilet rolls and everything like that. Toilet rolls were like the first problem. Then paracetamol for me, because that's part of my pain management with RA and a couple of other conditions. I couldn't get paracetamol for love nor money anywhere, and my GP wouldn't prescribe it on prescription because a lot of GPs' attitudes is you can buy it over the counter, and I just couldn't get hold of it anywhere. So I was in a lot of pain. And the March, it was, you know, when things started ramping up, I'm thinking, you know, where do I fit in this? And they started talking about shielding, where do I fit? So I rang my GP, who didn't have a clue, passed me over to the practice nurse, who didn't have a clue. I tried to get hold of my rheumatologist in London, and they didn't have really much of a clue either. It was just, and that made me start to panic then, because I'm thinking, Christ, you know, I could feel the barriers going up with the doctors and everything, and I'm thinking, and I started to get scared then. Our neighbour at that time contracted coronavirus. They were next door. It started getting really serious for us because they, you know, I'd been in there the week before, because there's a lot of where I'm at the moment, this is all sheltered accommodation and they're pool calls, and she had a fall next door, the neighbour, and there was nobody there to pick her up. She pulled that pool cord for an hour and a half. No one, it was me, had to go in there and pick her up. You pay £100 a year for that pool cord, and no one picked her up apart from me. And within a week of that, I had no taste and no smell and everything like that, although that wasn't recognised as a symptom or anything then. And they were seriously ill with the gastric form of coronavirus and everything like that. And then, you know, a few weeks later, you know, it was getting, you know, there were fights in supermarkets over the basics and everything. We had to go to the supermarkets because we couldn't get online delivery charges. And then when I got that letter to say, you know, don't go out, don't pass go, you've got to stay in, your class is clinically extremely vulnerable. And you look at that piece of paper and you think, you know, it's getting down to basics now. It's, you know, when we heard that announcement from Johnson, I come away from the TV, I burst into tears, because it really got down to basics. It's how we're going to eat, how we're going to get items, where we're going to get food items from. My council, the whole time during the pandemic, never contacted me once. I never got a food box or anything like that. And for a lot of disabled people who did get them, they weren't suitable for their dietary needs and everything like that as well. So I never got any access to online priority shopping, slots, nothing. I was just cut off, just literally just left. And, you know, it was my branch WhatsApp group was sharing links with me for items and everything to get, you know, different foods and everything like that. So we were trying to do online delivery shopping and stuff from different places, but everywhere put their prices up. Everywhere did. And it was getting, can we afford that item? This week it was making ingredients stretch. I mean, we really were stretching a packet of pasta a lot longer, and just, it was counting different bits. Can we have that, or can we go without that? And cutting things out and everything. And certain food items I needed to maintain part of my immune system, I couldn't get hold of. It resulted for me having to call out on Facebook. I think, David, you may have seen that. I had to put out on Facebook, I can't get paracetamol. Can anyone help me?
Yeah.
Then, you know, people coming, you know, sharing some of their supplies of paracetamol with me to keep me going during the pandemic, which was really, and I'm ever so grateful to everyone. I can't thank you enough to everyone who did that, because that was hard for me to reach out. Then the first death for me was our neighbour.
Obviously, it's like, it must be so hard, Paula. And
he had underlying health conditions. He was 75. He went into hospital on a Friday. and the staff didn't give him any oxygen, and he left him to die. And that was the thing with this, what people don't talk about. If you had an underlying health condition, or you were a certain age, you didn't get access to an ICU bed, you weren't ventilated, you weren't given oxygen, you were left to die. And that's what happened to him. He died on the 19th of April at our local hospital here. They left, he said, he's 75, he's too old, we're not giving him oxygen. They left him for 3 days to die. They left him to die. That really hit home because she was still sick. We couldn't go in to help her because we were isolating, but thankfully we had a garden space, which was an absolute lifeline during lockdown, having a garden. So we were socially distancing away from, because we got shorter fences, so we were shouting over and to check on everyone. Our next door neighbour was 101, and she was in and out of hospital. Last year they were, everybody along here, literally disabled people and older people in sheltered accommodation were just cut off. They were just left. There was no one to contact. There was just no help. Whatever food parcels we got for deliveries, we were cutting up and sharing with neighbours and dropping off at doorstops and everything like that to make sure people eat, because that's the only food they were getting. There was no offer, there was no help. And for us, we didn't have family close by in order to help us, and a lot of our friends and everything were shielding. So WhatsApp and Facebook and everything become a vital lifeline to check on everybody. And I then, Unite started contacting me, said, there are people who need food parcels and medication. They're struggling to get medication, they can't get it delivered. So we were organising a network of people to help with deliveries and everything, and getting food parcels and everything. They couldn't get bread, they couldn't get milk, they couldn't get really basic items, it come down to that. And we were showing solidarity to other members, trying to get support and everything. And we got through to the summer. My aunt got taken, she was in hospital. They didn't do a coronavirus test. They put her in a nursing home in Bromley, and the place was a breeding ground for coronavirus. And she passed away 2 days after my birthday last year. I was robbed of the chance to say goodbye to her. And obviously shielding, I wasn't allowed to go out for her funeral or anything like that. That was the hardest. I grew up, my aunt was like my big sister. We shared a room when I was growing up. So that was, excuse my language, that was fucking tough. Then got to August, started braving. We had a dog at the time, started braving, going out, walking the dog. It was scary because people were just ignoring. Some of the guidelines were starting to be lifted. Some of the information was really patchy, and it was scary. And I had these kids on e-scooters come by me, and I've shared, I think, that story. That's when I got violently assaulted and I had my eye socket fractured and everything. I've got no feeling from literally that side of the face down. I've been left with permanent facial numbness on this side now, and a reduced sense of smell and vision. And I was too scared. I mean, going into A&E and it was like war zone measures. I think you could only see, it was all this hazard tape everywhere, and you couldn't go here and you couldn't go there and everything like that. And the staff couldn't have been more brilliant with me. I mean, I was covered in blood and everything, but they were absolutely fantastic with me. And I couldn't thank them enough for the treatment that I had. But what we saw in residential and nursing homes over the coronavirus pandemic, disabled people and older people were just left to die in their thousands, and the staff as well. And it's got to be said that frontline, nursing and doctor staff also bore the brunt of a lot of deaths. But, thousands of disabled people had do not resuscitate placed on their medical records without their knowledge or without their consent, especially if you had a learning disability. you know, you're 18 to 30 years old, you were 30 times more likely to die in that age group than you were a non-disabled person. So I was dealing with the aftermath of my attack, and 2 days after I lost my aunt, I lost my mental health support. It was taken from me, had no warning, no nothing. I'd been under a mental health team for quite some time for severe distress. They just took it from me. They left me with nothing. So I had to find a low-cost therapist to help me deal with the aftermath of the attack, which I'm still having therapy for now, and deal with the bereavement of my aunt, which I'm still processing, and a lot of other people that I know have gone. And I just couldn't get my head around any of it. It was just, it got to the stage I was dreading hearing the phone ringing, switching on the laptop, because it was death after death after death like that. And then October, it got, my niece and nephew were taken ill with it because they went back to school, and the schools around here were just a breeding ground. No one was wearing masks. No one was, just, the rules just went to pieces here. And thankfully, I mean, they recovered, but the myth that kids couldn't get coronavirus was a load of bollocks, because schools were a breeding ground for coronavirus. And then, you know, we were hearing rumours that, you know, London, it was getting really critical here again. And obviously, you know, 4 days before Christmas, we went into tier 4 lockdown. So I was told you got to shield again and everything. So Christmas for me in tier 4 was, you know, a lot of fun. You couldn't see family. I couldn't, my mum's still in hospital. I couldn't see her. We couldn't grieve for my aunt. You know, I was trying to process the attack. I was just trying to process what the hell was going on. Energy costs were rising. You know, we also had my partner's mum in hospital during November. So it just went boom, 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 right? You know, even now, I mean, when I'm going to London, you know, for hospital and everything, I had my first face-to-face appointment about 3 weeks ago. I had a panic attack in the waiting room. The thought of being in a waiting room for to see a doctor was absolutely dreadful. And the doctor, I was in a lot of pain. I was in the middle of a flare. I felt so shit anyway. I thought, how the hell, don't know how I got to London for that. But to go for a first, you know, I haven't seen my GP 2 years. Can't get an appointment for love nor money. You know, they're just not seeing anybody. They're really overworked as well. And when, I think for a lot of disabled people, not having access to medical professionals during lockdown, and when they needed it, and you saw health conditions worsen over lockdown for a lot of disabled people, you know, my mental health definitely did. I think my physical health definitely did. And, you know, so trying to, my therapist, I mean, is really great. We speak every week, but it's fine. I still have got to find the £10 a week to pay for my therapist, because NHS long-term therapy is gone. There is no long-term NHS therapy anymore. You can't get it. I was offered by my GP 3 sessions for the violent attack I went through. 3 sessions at 10 minutes. I've been violently assaulted, had my eye socket fractured, have 3 10-minute sessions on a phone. That wasn't enough for what I'd just been through, and having to deal with the bereavement. It was not enough. And for that, I think a lot of people can relate to a similar experience to mine. Sorry, I'm emotional, but there was a lot of that. And I think DPAC having the online Zoom, trying to get used to Zoom and campaigning, I'm sure Jan and David and even Paul, you can relate to that. It's been I'm not techie at all, so trying to get my head around Zoom was a bit but DPAC had a really good series of meetings during the summer, and that really helped refocus where we needed the fight to be. In one way it was great, because you could be in bed and resting and being in Zoom. You didn't have to leave the house to go travel 3 or 4 hours to get somewhere. You were, so for me doing Zoom, that was helpful. I think, to be honest with you, social media, WhatsApp and talking to everybody online has been an absolute lifeline for me. Just being with my DPAC brothers and sisters online saying, hey, how are you? You know, how you going? But from the medical professionals and everything, the lack of support, me being in grief and having that first injection, the first vaccine, that was back in February. There was no social distancing in that vaccine centre, and it was chaos, and it scared the absolute shit out of me. There was a guy next to me, had the Pfizer jab, thrown up on the floor. I felt really sick afterwards. There was not the support at first if you were feeling really crap after that injection. They were just literally right in, out, off you go. And for like 3 or 4 weeks after that first injection, I was really, really unwell with it. But to be honest with you, with my autoimmune condition, I don't have much of an autoimmune condition, and I'm on disease modifying drug, which are chemotherapy meds. I'd rather have the vaccine but it doesn't stop you contracting coronavirus. But I'm really cautious when I'm out there. I won't use the underground if I can at all avoid it. But I'm seeing on trains and buses and that people are not wearing masks, and it's scaring the shit out of me. And it's the same in shops, you know. I'm still classed by, you know, I've been told by my doctors to be distancing and, you know, avoid busy places. Well, how can you avoid shops and buses and trains and all the rest of it, because they're busy all the time? So yeah, it was a lot of, last year was really, really, for me, but you know, many other people have had even worse experiences than mine. I've never, if I could get hold of Boris Johnson right now, I'd slap him. I'd throttle him with my bare hands. He has got blood on his hands. So has every minister, for the dreadful mistakes they made during the pandemic. And I've got to say, subsequent governments have as well, for the horrific conscious cruelty they've carried out in 12 years, and for the thousands of disabled people that are no longer with us. And it's got to be said, this government, you know, people find it really hard to believe, but this government are guilty of human rights violations on a mass scale, and they're continuing with it. And where is the outcry? Apart from us who are going through it, where is the outcry from the wider left and also the wider public? Where the fuck is it? Because we need support out there, because we know it's not just going to be the pandemic. We've seen so many people die, disabled people die, that with what's coming, more are going to die. With social care, you know, what happened during the pandemic with social care was a travesty. They cut disabled people's care packages when it was needed the most. My aunt's care package was cut before she, when she was in hospital. They cut it by 60%. You know, she had 3 carers a day coming to her. They cut it down to 1, and they couldn't manage. And then just, there was a lot of that going on. They cut so many people's disabled care packages. It's just.
Well, I want to thank you for such incredible and powerful speech there, because people at home are all sending a love and solidarity to you as well. People who are watching, and you know, that's I suppose that's all we can give you at this stage. But it is absolutely incredible that DPAC, given all those experiences, I think it makes what DPAC are doing now all the more powerful. The bravery that you're facing the world with, that you're going out and doing, and taking it and holding this government to account. Because we had a discussion before we came on, and I think, like, in a very similar vein to what you said there, Jan mentioned, and you said who is holding these to account. And I think that was probably aimed at which politicians are holding them to account, because they aren't being held. Do you think that's fair, Jan? They aren't really being held to account by politicians.
I don't think anyone is being held to account. It's not just your Westminster politicians, it's your local governments, it's your local authorities. There has been no leadership whatsoever dealing with this pandemic, none at all. And what they have done is cause the problem to be far greater. And it's happening again. We know it's happening again right now. They're not even getting prepared. I know I've seen them going into school, no masks, whereas we're just 3 weeks behind Scotland and having 1 in 45 people having COVID now. And I think they've still got this so-called frailty index where disabled people And this, to be quite honest, this includes children will not receive the high intensity of care in hospitals. They'll be left just like before.
Absolutely shocking. But that does bring us to the. Oh, sorry, David. Did you want to come in there?
They're also planning to end any support for shielding as well from this month.
Mm.
So anybody who is classed as clinically extremely vulnerable, will get no support. This is when we're on over 1,000 deaths a week now from COVID. We have more deaths going on than this time last year when there were no vaccines. And this is just the start. We're not even in the autumn-winter period. And nobody will get support shielding, so that people will be forced to go out to get food, to get the things they need. And it links in to the cut to the £20 universal credit, which we're probably going to move on to next, because it's all about whipping people back into the workplace, keep profits going, to keep debts going, because of what happened, particularly after 2008. And sometimes when people say these things are mistakes, I wonder if they are mistakes. Is it built into the system that, according to the ruling class, only some people matter and the rest don't matter? Because you've not just seen it in the UK, you've seen it in other countries as well. It's something that's built into capitalism, and always has been, that certain lives are not as worthy as others.
Yeah. And I think when you look at actually productivity didn't go down as much as you would think, given I think there were a lot of bullshit jobs not being done. But I tend to mention bullshit jobs quite a lot because I absolutely love that book by David Graeber. It is well worth a read if you get the opportunity to do that, and this does link in with that, but that's for another time. What I want to do now is I want to focus on what actions DPAC are taking, because to be honest, I'm absolutely inspired by the fact that people like the three of you and so many people around the country have faced such a challenging time and yet are willing to go out and actually stand up to this government. Someone is holding them to account, and there are groups like yours doing that. So you've got two big actions coming up, haven't you? Is it next week? Is it next weekend? Tell me a little bit about what's coming
Okay,
up.
Paul, do you want to?
You sure, David, you can go in if you want, or do you want me?
You go ahead, because you've been involved in the actual planning of it. So
the 25th of September, which is a Saturday, we're having what is called a National Day of Local Actions. So we're asking disabled people and our allies to put on, under the hashtag Audioriot, have a really noisy action, street stall, even get a group of friends, get some instruments and play in your local street and sing about the cuts, be creative, but have local actions across the country. Now, what DPAC will do is they will advertise the action for you with the lead activist details, email or something, and put them in touch with other people who want to join in, or do something online. Norwich DPAC are doing some memes, I think. They're very angry over Chloe Smith, who's the Norwich North MP, becoming Minister for Disabled People. So they're doing a load of memes to share online on the day. So that's the 25th. On the 28th and on the Tuesday, we've got a legacy benefit court case going on the 28th and 29th. So legacy benefits are benefits like ESA, employment and support allowance, job seekers allowance, income support. Legacy benefit claimants weren't included in the £20 uplift during the pandemic. So two disabled people are bringing a case against the government, and they're using the European Convention of Human Rights. So it's a human rights violation under the European Convention. So I believe the court case starts in the afternoon on the 28th. DPAC, it's going to be our first direct action in 18 months. So we are going to be having a very loud, action. We're going to be meeting at King's Cross Station Courtyard at 11:30. We've got samba bands coming. We're asking people to bring drums, or bring whistles, bring cymbals, bring anything that makes a racket, because we want this protest to be at construction level sound, basically. But we are providing earplugs and ear defenders and headphones for many disabled people who can't bear noise. And we've got banners made and everything. So we're asking everyone, join us at King's Cross, 28th, 11:30. Just come and join us. If you can't, join us online. And Sheffield DPAC's made some amazing little vox pop videos and graphics. They're really funky and they're really cool. People, share them. We need your help. Share them. Or hashtag Audioriot.
Shall I share them?
Yeah, just share them in the chat. Hashtag Audioriot and the Facebook event link. We need it plastered everywhere, right, in the next few days. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. And it's basically to highlight the cut to universal credit, the £20 uplift, also for legacy benefit claimants not being included in the uplift as well. But it's about anything that and also the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on disabled people's lives. So we know a lot of disabled people are shielding still and don't feel safe to come out. So there will be a live stream on the day. So just come and join in and support us, basically. And then on the 30th, which is when the final day of the UC cut will come in, we are having a protest outside number 10 at 5:30 in the afternoon. So people come down to Downing Street and support us down there. Then on the 4th of October, which is when the Tory party delegates in Manchester will be, Rishi Sunak's doing his main keynote speech then. Manchester DPAC have a Advan mobile video screen going around the streets of Manchester called Disability Justice on Screen. So we're asking disabled people to make 1 to 2 minute videos, how austerity's impacted on them, how the pandemic's impacted on them, and they're going to be shown on the screen, you know, all together, speaking the appalling truth to the delegates of the party they support, basically. So Manchester DPAC have got a meeting on the 22nd of September. It's at 7, so they can record disabled people and using British Sign Language and making the videos accessible. So that's a pretty cool little thing that Manchester DPAC are going on. So yeah, just get involved and come and support us. And you know, our actions are pretty fun when we're out there, but we're very angry as well. And we're gonna let the government hear us. And we've titled the hashtag Audioriot. It's in response to the government's crime and police bill, when they want to bring in that noisy protests will be banned. Basically, you face arrest. So that's in response to that. And also the word riot. We're a peaceful, non-violent direct action group, by the way, people. But the word riot pisses off the police. They don't like the word, so we added that in. So that's where it comes from.
Okay. Thank you so much, and that sounds really, really fun. Was that from your computer, David? A little couple of noises there.
Noise coming from the YouTube video. And then it went on to another video after that, so I had to mute myself. Sorry about that.
No problem at all.
There's a lot of stuff to share. I've shared about the YouTube video. Did we tell people to bring ear defenders and earplugs, Paula? Because we're at 100 decibel or more levels, which is louder than me shouting. But so I've just shared some of the stuff. There's a whole load more if people want to contact DPAC in different colorways and different things there.
We'll share them on the Socialist Think Tank page at the end of the show. So we'll get those out there. We also, a little bit of Socialist Think Tank news. We are at the World Transformed. We've got Jeremy Corbyn on our show at 4 p.m. next Saturday. We will, if with your permission, we might share a clip from that and highlight Audioriot while we're doing that. It's so we're on between. We've got John McDonnell's interview and Bernie Sanders just before us. Then it's us on with Jeremy Corbyn, and I'd love to do a little clip from DPAC there, maybe one of the Audioriot clips to highlight that, to find out if we can publicise your cause a little bit more. But it's going to be Socialist Night Live at 4 p.m. It's always night time somewhere. It's going to be at 4 p.m. next week because we're at the World Transformed in Brighton, so we won't be in our normal time slot, but do watch us at 4 p.m. down there, and we'll see if we can maybe get involved with a couple of other things while we're down there as well.
Can I just say, actually, talking about down in Brighton, we've got Jem from Sheffield DPAC and a few activists, other disabled activists, who are going to be holding a solidarity vigil with us on the 28th down in Brighton, 11 o'clock. It's going to be at the Old Steen, I think it is. So pop along there at 11 o'clock and show solidarity to us while we're going to be busy in London doing our stuff. And Jeremy's actually made a solidarity video message for DPAC's actions. Actually, we've just got that and transcribing that at the moment, which has been really good of him to do that. And we, John McDonnell's been a prolific supporter of DPAC over many years, and he loves our actions and seeing us dressed up as clowns for Maximus, or the same circus, different clowns. And he was there when I was tied to the Westminster Abbey gates in 2014, and the cops come out of nowhere and everything, so yeah, it's going to be so protest in Brighton, but if you're in London, come and join us.
Brilliant. I think I've been reliably informed that we are the warm-up act for Bernie rather than the other way around. Woo-hoo. So yeah, we're the Bernie support act.
Can I just say one thing about the £20 cut to universal credit? It is the biggest cut to welfare spending in British history, apparently. Because obviously, as people, I think people have pointed out in the chat, what happened is when the pandemic came along, and a lot of people found out they had no job, or were having to rely on universal credit to get by. A sort of two-tier system came in place, like a softer social security system, so that people wouldn't find out really how harsh and how punitive it had been for people over the previous 10 years. All these people have been blaming welfare spending for the woes of the world. Suddenly having to go onto social security. If they found out exactly how punitive it was, obviously you'd get a lot of solidarity forming between them and people like me and Paula and me and Jan. So that didn't really happen because they've been on a higher rate, £20 a week more. But it's the largest one-off welfare spending cut in history, outstripping the Tories' 1998 slashing of housing benefits and even the 1931 cut to unemployment benefit during the Great Depression. So obviously, the ruling class have a habit of doing these kind of things when times are tough. But this is the worst example of it. At a time when the gap between rich and poor has never been greater, and when there's never been more wealth in the world.
Really, really poignant. Okay, we are down to the last 10 minutes, and it's been absolutely incredible to hear these stories, and I'm sure everyone at home will agree. It's been incredibly powerful to hear your testimonies, what's happened to you, and most people are saying things like, we need to hear more from people like you. We need to hear more of your stories. We need to understand these things. Because me personally, as a socialist, I kind of believe that people are good deep down. I kind of believe in the goodness of humanity. And when you talked about what happened during the pandemic, it brought out the best in people. And it brought out the worst in the worst people, didn't it? So the pandemic, we've seen this massive disparity between how people have behaved, but I think most people were good, and when people hear those stories, then people will be with you. I'm absolutely sure. So we will continue to try and make sure that people hear as much about this as possible. And thank you for being such good human beings and putting such a good relatable face to these issues, because I think that makes a massive, massive difference. You're not statistics, you're real human beings who are absolutely incredible, and I'm in awe of what you've been doing. I'm going to now ask you to all make some closing comments. I'm going to come to Jan first. So have you got any closing comments, anything that you didn't manage to get out during the main show, anything you want us to look out for, or anything that you want to comment on at all? Free for all.
I was going to say, yeah, it's horrifying what we had from the institutions, but what was great, like I live in a village and it's got a mining history. Our village pulled together, delivered food, made food with different charities, but it was all on people's own bat. It wasn't from central charities. It wasn't from there. It was the local community. So I'm just so grateful I lived in a village and it was that they supported everybody.
Yeah, that was. So, do you think that was because of the mining heritage of the village and maybe things that they've gone through and that solidarity that people do show in those villages a lot of the time?
They've got a very strong community. So historically, yes, through the mining, that they've obviously supported each other through the most horrific, which I would not understand, miners' strike. But they have a history of supporting each other and looking out for each other and everybody. Clubbing together and making sure everybody's okay. And this is a fantastic, I was very grateful that I live in a fantastic place.
Isn't it funny as well? A lot of people started talking about mutual aid, and actually the Tories started talking about solidarity at one point in the pandemic, which is when my bullshit radar was really on high alert there. I'm going to come to Paula next. Paula, thank you so much for your contributions, and I know it's been hard for you discussing what you've done, but it's been absolutely amazing and tremendously powerful. But have you got anything to close with?
I think the most important thing is it's not about being good, it's about doing what's right, really, and that is supporting one another and showing solidarity. And right now solidarity is needed more than ever. And I think, DPAC for me it's given me so much. It gave me confidence when I could have given up, back in 2012, and they literally kept me alive. And I said that to co-founder Linda Burnett back in 2014, said, what you did, setting up DPAC, and when I got involved, after work capability assessment and everything, I could have given up. But DPAC gave me a voice and it gave me courage to take, support them to take the government on. And we're going to need to take this government on. There is no ifs, no buts. We've got to take them on. And I think hoping that the actions we're going to be taking in the next couple of weeks, empower others to get involved and build the movement and, hit this government back with everything we've got, because we've got to hit them back.
Brilliant. Should put you in charge, Paula, I think now from now on. I want to. Well, see, that makes me want you to be in charge even more. The person who doesn't want to be in charge, that's the person I want in charge. But anyway, we should all be in charge. We should all do it together as a collective.
The collective.
Yeah, that's what we need to be doing. David.
I would say, well, thank you for doing shows like this.
Mm-hmm.
For actually getting the truth out, because one of the reasons why other people aren't doing anything about what's happening is because of the media shilling the government. They have not been holding them to account. They've not been reporting all the stuff that Paula talked about. We've talked about how much has that actually been on the media? The actual truth, the suffering of people, hardly any of it, So building an alternative media, keeping that coming out, getting people to just basically switch off the BBC. They are a government mouthpiece. Nothing from the BBC is worth media is worth listening to or hearing. And in come and support the Audioriot. If you can come to London in person, do so. Join in online, use the hashtag Audioriot, share your stories, share the truth, and get people thinking, even if they don't want to think. Get them actually looking at what they need to look at, rather than the bullshit that they're being distracted with.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, I completely agree, and thank you for saying that about independent media. It gives me the opportunity to say, please do share this video if you've enjoyed it. Please do; it will stay there forever, or as long as YouTube and Facebook and things like that exist. Do subscribe to us on all our platforms. It really, really does help. Leave some comments that you've been doing tonight, which is absolutely brilliant. You can join Socialist Think Tank. You can become a member. What we do is we act as a little community where we come together, share ideas, and we will be looking at some policies coming up in the future. In order to join Socialist Think Tank, you don't have to pay anything. You can donate if you want. It does help us to do what we do, but we are not expecting anything from anyone. So if you want to join Socialist Think Tank and contribute, you most certainly can. If you wanted to set up your own channel through Socialist Think Tank and get support in that way, which we are doing at the moment, we're talking about, I think oh sorry, I forgot the name, but it's in Yorkshire. I think it might be West Yorkshire, but I'm not sure. Our latest area to be getting their own Socialist Think Tank. We've got London, we've got South East, and we have got West Midlands. I think West Midlands. Sorry, West Midlands if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. And we've got those areas. So if you wanted to set up your own and do what we do, we will help you to do that, because we need to get these messages out. Also, DPAC could do one if they wanted a Socialist Think Tank DPAC. We'd help you to do that and set that up, and you can have discussions like this all the time. This is about us coming together and doing something. No one's going to get us out of this mess. That's how I feel at the moment. We're going to have to do it together. And together we can actually change the world. But there's no one going to come and save us. We've seen the absolute mess that politics has been over the past 18 months, and probably a lot longer than that, to be honest. And, let's not wait around to be rescued. Let's do what DPAC do. Let's get out there. Let's change the world together, and let's support one another, because that is really the only way things are going to improve. I'm going to say night to you all. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions on the chat. You have been absolutely incredible as always. We have the best audience in the world. It's only small, but it's very, very clever and very caring, and we do really appreciate everything you do. Take care, everyone. We will see you soon. We'll see you next week. We'll see you on Tuesday for Political Unmuted. We have got an Origins show on Thursday. Political Unmuted's 9 p.m, by the way. On Thursday, we have got another one of our series of Origins. It's absolutely brilliant, well worth a watch. And we will be back in the Socialist Night Live slot, not at 9 p.m. next week, but at 4 p.m. So we will see you then, and we'll probably send you a few little things from the World Transformed as well. Take care, everyone, and we will see you then.
Keep the red flag flying here.